financial problems, elder law, tax problems, business matters, divorce, personal injury, bankruptcy, your life, your reality. Life is complicated. There is the law and there is reality. Welcome to Law and Reality, sponsored by THAV GROSS. Now here's your host, Ken Gross.
Welcome to this segment of Law and Reality. Today's topic is forming a business. Jenny Lingl.
Good morning, Ken. Good to be here.
Pat Samasco.
Good morning, good morning. I risked life and limb this morning to get here. Telegraph traffic.
No speeding.
No speeding.
And no texting while driving.
Yes, yes.
Brian Small.
Always a pleasure, Ken. I did not risk life and limb. I plodded along and
By horseback.
Yeah, practically.
About the horseman
but
went
did get here on
faster.
time regardless.
So, different topic today. Forming a business. I thought we would just take something, actually it was Jenny's idea, walk through the elements of forming a business, what you need to know. It's something that people, I think, don't emphasize enough in the planning stage of starting a new venture. There's a lot of difficult issues in forming a business, particularly with the new tax laws. So let's start off. What are the steps? Well, first of all, think in terms of whether you're buying a business or you're starting something up from scratch. If you're buying a business, there's two things that you have to go through. How am I going to operate? Do I want to be a corporation? Do I want to be an LLC? Do I want to be what's called a pass-through entity, which means that rather than the corporate entity being taxed, the tax flows through to me individually and I pay the tax that way. But that choice of entity comes in whether you're buying a business or whether you're starting one from scratch. Let's talk about buying a business first. When you buy a business, this is the thing that people don't realize. If you're spending $5 million to buy a business, or you're spending $500,000 to buy a business, all the same issues exist from a standpoint of if you're the buyer, things that you have to look for to protect yourself, and if you're the seller, you have the same issue.
And those, just for the record, even if it's $50,000, because you're buying a small store, the same issues arise.
It's not quite as complex, but you'll find as you walk through this, even if you're spending, as Brian said, $50,000, $10,000, $15,000, there's a lot of things that you need to consider when you're purchasing a business to make sure that, from my perspective, you're not held liable for the taxes of your successor.
Yeah, that's another right there. So the seller owes payroll taxes. Seller hasn't paid his sales tax. Seller hasn't paid his federal unemployment tax. And all of a sudden, he's selling the business to you. He hasn't paid his state unemployment tax. He's selling the business to you. Can you be held liable for those taxes? And the answer is yes, unless you take the proper precautions. So let me just kind of run through the basics. You have a purchase agreement when you're buying a business. In that purchase agreement, you have to deal with tax allocations. For instance, if you're buying a business and you're spending, let's just take the easy number, $500,000. What are you buying for the $500,000? You're not just buying the business, you're buying the business's assets. That's going to include equipment, it's going to include a covenant not to compete from the seller, it's going to include goodwill. How you allocate the purchase price against those assets depends or creates consequences as to how you can deduct the expense tax-wise. If you put the money to goodwill, you can deduct it over 15 years. If you put it to equipment, you can deduct it much quicker, sometimes in the first year, sometimes over 6-7 years.
Do you have to get an agreement with the seller on how you do that?
It's a negotiated item in the purchase agreement, because if you allocate it to goodwill versus covenant not to compete, to the seller, the covenant not to compete is ordinary income. The goodwill to the seller is capital gain. So you have a tension between buyer and seller that you have to negotiate. But if you don't know it, you just accept the seller's allocation.
But if you're between goodwill and a covenant not to compete, does it really matter to you, the buyer, where would it make a difference and how would it make a difference?
To the buyer, it doesn't matter, but you don't want to go ahead and allocate everything to goodwill, because if the seller violates the covenant not to compete and you only allocated $10,000 to the covenant not to compete, what happens when the seller's attorney shows up in court? He says, they only allocated $10,000 to the covenant not to compete and they're suing us for $500,000, Judge. This is ridiculous. If the covenant not to compete was so important, why wouldn't they have allocated more money? So you have to be careful about all that stuff.
I got chills listening to how he said that.
I know,
Man,
it's
oh man,
amazing.
wow.
I've made that argument
Wow.
myself. What you always have to remember is, as lawyers, we argue both sides of the coin. I've argued that same ridiculous argument before because it was in my client's favor, and I've been on the other side saying, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. You allocate for tax purposes, Judge, whether it's to the covenant not to compete or whether it's to the goodwill, doesn't matter, the obligation is the same. But anyway, you also have warranties in the purchase agreement. If you're the buyer, you want the seller to warrant that the financial statements were valid and that they were true and that there were no deviations unless they're disclosed.
So let me ask about that. So that financial disclosures that come with the warranties, what if they aren't true? What if you buy the business, you've bought a restaurant, they show you all the financials, and everything looks good?
They were lying?
And they were lying.
They were stealing from you.
They were stealing from the business, or they were making the books look like they were making more money than they actually were, so they could sell the business.
If you have the right warranties, you have a good fraud claim, you have a breach of contract claim, and you have a fraud claim that you can sue. You can sue to rescind the transaction, give them back their business and take back your money. You can sue them for money damages.
How long do you have to do that?
A basic basic statute of limitations on a contract claim is 6 years, unless the contract provides for shortening that period. So you have to see if it's what's contained in the contract. That's also a negotiated
Would that
term.
be difficult to prove? And how would you go about
it's not
proving
that difficult to approve if you identify and they fraudulently cooked up their they gave you tax returns that weren't true. You can acquire the actual tax return. If the financial statement doesn't match to the bank deposits, it takes work, but it's a provable item. We come back from the break, we'll kick through a few more items, and then we'll move on.
Tax problems are major problems. Don't let the IRS levy your wages and seize your assets. There is a solution.
We're THAV GROSS. Our firm will solve your problem.
If you're behind on your taxes and owe money to the IRS, call THAV GROSS.
We've been solving tax problems for 32 years. We stop wage levies, resolve unfiled returns, and obtain the best possible settlements.
Call THAV GROSS today, 888-235-HELP. If you're retired and in a financial crisis, there is a way out.
It pains me when I see a retired couple exhaust their savings by paying credit card bills and for a home hopelessly underwater.
THAV GROSS specializes in helping retired people in financial crisis.
You just can't keep paying until you're broke. You need to address the problem now.
888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
We're THAV GROSS. Our firm will solve your problem.
You're all set to retire. You have your home paid off, money in the bank, and sound investments. But if you're not careful, all the things that you work so hard for can disappear. At Samasco Financial, we'll help you prevent that. We go beyond ordinary asset management. We'll safeguard everything that you have by creating a plan made specifically for you. How much can you afford to lose? Nothing. Protect the people that you love and the things that you have. Call Samasco Financial today.
You can't work. You have to deal with pain and stress. Worse yet, our system for applying for disability benefits seeks to deny you the benefits you're entitled. Jeff Kirshner is an expert in obtaining disability and workers' compensation benefits for his clients. You need to call Jeff before you apply or after you're denied to get the benefits you deserve. 888-235-HELP. 888-235-HELP. Carrying too much debt? Resolve your debt. Call THAV GROSS.
You don't need to be broke, and you don't need to hit rock bottom. If you have income and you're struggling with debt, dump it. Think about the next 10 or 20 years. If you do what the banks tell you, you'll have nothing to retire with. there is a solution.
Don't waste your future. Call THAV GROSS. We're experts at eliminating credit card debt. 888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
All right, so we're talking about the elements that you need to deal with in a purchase agreement. And the most important thing is to realize is there are actually intricate issues that you need to have someone really who knows about buying a business looking out for you. A couple more examples. Security. If you're buying the business and you're not paying, from the seller's perspective, the best way to sell a business is get 100% cash. If you get 100% cash, the only thing you have to worry about from the seller is getting your money and making as few warranties as you possibly can, because every time you make a warranty, you potentially could be called upon for it or be sued if it turns out to be false. So if you make no warranties, you get cash, easy job for the seller. But a lot of times the seller has to
Good luck
find
on that one.
Yeah.
Good luck
Right.
on that one.
Well,
Seller
no,
has to
but
find
that's
it.
going to happen though. That not the cash part, but the no warranties part and things like that. It happens a lot. I see in smaller business sales,
Yeah.
like the $50,000, the $30,000, the $100,000.
No, I
business
just want to mention something too. When you're actually looking at getting into that business, you better really look at how much you really can afford to lose, because so many businesses do go out of business, and you start out thinking it's going to be $50,000. Next thing you know, it's $500,000 because you keep throwing money at it. And there goes your retirement accounts. You
Well, in
cash
addition
in, you
to
borrowed
that,
your parents'
you
money.
need to be
If you're
cautious.
thinking you're buying a small business, I had a client purchase a pizza place for $35,000, and she says, well, what's the worst that can happen? I go out of business. Well, she ignored some notices. She didn't get tax clearance, and the next thing you know, she's on the hook for $100,000 of state sales and withholding taxes personally,
Plus
because
a 5-year lease that
she
signed.
didn't do what
The
her due
lease.
diligence.
And the equipment purchase agreement, she didn't realize she was guaranteeing
hook,
that and
yeah.
everything else, and before she
Well,
knows
honey,
she's
this is
in
our
here for
retirement.
bankruptcy.
This is our
Well,
retirement.
and
That
if they're-
doesn't mean don't do a new business,
Right.
because you want to pursue your dreams, but you
No, it
need to
means
vet the
get
thing
your ducks
carefully.
in a row. Make sure that you're organized. Make sure you get the right advice.
But I
from
think
the
that shows the
beginning.
complication between
Yeah.
this is buying an existing business versus starting your own
You
new business,
start-
which doesn't have some of the same problems.
But it can. You sign a new lease. Everything can become worse if you don't look out for yourself. Every landlord who hands someone a lease to sign has a personal guarantee attached at the back, because why not? People go and say, well, this is a standard form, I've got to sign it. You don't have to sign it. You negotiate the terms. The first thing that I do when they hand me that form on the guarantee is I take a big marker and I put an X through it. And then I make my comments on the rest of the lease and send it back to the seller. Now, that doesn't mean the seller's going to agree. The seller may say, no, unless I get the personal guarantee, I will not lease
What
the
is a
property.
personal guarantee?
Personal guarantee means if you're, let's suppose the lease is in the name of your corporation, if you fail to pay, your personal assets are on the hook for the obligation for all the unpaid rent.
So
and
you
any
do the
damages.
corporation to protect liability, but then you sign on
But then you
personally
unravel it
for
by the
Yeah.
personal guarantees.
But the corporation protects liability from all other entities, theoretically, other than somebody who's giving you the opportunity to put the
Injuries.
business in place in the first place. You know, small business wanting to open up a shop someplace, the landlord has the power. They're not going to say, "Oh, sure, just come on in, lease, and if you go out of business, don't worry about it. I won't hold you for the rent." So it's when you're a big company buying a big entity, there's more. You have more negotiating power the bigger you are. But the smaller
It's
you
not-
are,
Well, it's just supply and demand. It's not small, it's not big. I want to disagree from this standpoint. When the market is soft and you're going to lease a building and the landlord is desperate for a tenant, you don't need to guarantee. When the market is favorable to the landlord, doesn't matter who you are, the landlord says, I want a guarantee. This office building, the office building's next to me, I've leased for clients and represented them with the same landlord, one lease guarantee, next lease no guarantee. Why? Because the market conditions. When the market conditions are favorable to the tenant, you don't have to guarantee. When they're not, you do. But you can fight on the guarantee. You don't have to guarantee all 10 years. You guarantee the first 2 years. You guarantee the amount of the tenant improvements the landlord makes. You don't guarantee the whole thing. You need to fight for those things. You go and sign forms, you're going to give away the store. The broker hands you the purchase agreement and you think, oh, this is a standard form purchase agreement. No such thing.
What you're saying right there is you don't just need a lawyer, you need a lawyer that knows what the hell he's doing.
Oh,
Has been
absolutely.
through that.
Well, A lawyer that doesn't know what he's doing is worse than no lawyer at all.
Right.
Because then you get peace of mind that you don't really get any peace of mind, and you have to pay him.
Right.
That's the worst thing. You got to be careful. So the quick issues, if you're the seller though, and you're financing the transaction, you want to get a security agreement on the assets. You need a promissory note. You want guarantees from the owners of the business. Maybe you want a second mortgage on their home. You want to make sure you're going to get paid. When you're financing the transaction as the seller, you're effectively the bank. If you're the bank, you want to make sure you've got good collateral. Banks don't just loan you the money and say, oh, if you feel like paying it back, go ahead, or if not, we'll just take the assets. They want as much collateral as possible. You need to do the same things. If you're buying real estate, you got to be concerned about environmental issues. You got to have a phase 1 and potentially a phase 2 survey. If you're going to borrow the money from the bank, you've got to comply with all the requirements that the bank makes. And that's another one. People, when they're buying a house or buying a business and they're financing it through a bank, think, well, if the bank approved my loan, I don't have anything to worry about. I don't need a lawyer because the bank's looking out for the bank. Banks make mistakes. Banks are sloppy, and banks aren't looking out for you. Banks are looking out for them. You still need to look out for yourself. You need to be very careful on that.
Yeah, you need that because a lot of the people that are buying the business, that's their dream, like you said, and they put blinders on to all that type of stuff. They just want to get in there and open up the door and
I'll be successful.
Oh,
it doesn't matter what the terms are. I'm going to make money.
You got to have the opposite side.
I can't tell you how many pizza places I've put out of business through the years and filed bankruptcy for because the auto worker that took their buyout money and bought a pizza place.
Or their mom's buyout money.
You absolutely need to look at that contingency, and you need to budget for the expense of dealing with the proper investigation. Your accountant, your lawyer, you need insurance to protect you on all those things. We'll come back after the break and we'll talk about which entity to use.
Is the debt piling up? Struggling to get by?
It's all about preserving future income. Bankruptcy is one option. When it's right, it's the least costly, most effective way to save your home, eliminate a second mortgage, and wipe out credit card debt. But you need to address the problem now.
We help people with bankruptcy. Call the experts.
We're THAV GROSS. Our firm will solve your problem.
888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
A lifetime of hard work. If you don't have the right plan in place, you can lose your home, your savings, and more. And you didn't come this far to lose everything. Samasco Law wants you to know that laws are changing. Today, the average cost of nursing home care is $85,000 a year. With proper planning, we can help protect your life savings and get you the Medicaid and nursing home benefits you deserve.
How much can you afford to lose? Call Samasco Law today.
Nothing provokes panic and fear like the threat of a school shooting. Unfortunately, we've seen a sharp increase in students making copycat threats in order to gain notoriety. I'm Macomb County Prosecutor Eric Smith. Students, this behavior will not be tolerated. Felony charges will be brought against anyone who threatens the safety of our schools. Parents, please talk to your children and pass along this message. If you threaten our schools, it will cost you your future.
Tax problems are major problems. Don't let the IRS levy your wages and seize your assets. There is a solution.
We're THAV GROSS. Our firm will solve your problem.
If you're behind on your taxes and owe money to the IRS, call THAV GROSS.
We've been solving tax problems for 32 years. We stop wage levies, resolve unfiled returns, and obtain the best possible settlements.
Call THAV GROSS today, 888-235-HELP.
Time for announcements. We want to remind our viewers to listen to us Tuesdays 11:30 a.m. and Saturdays 7 o'clock a.m. for Law and Reality Live on Praise 102.7. Also on Saturdays 11 o'clock a.m. 103.5 The Light for Law and Reality Now. Be sure and sign up for our monthly contest. Free $50 Visa gift card, Law and Reality hat, and copy of my book Dump Your Debt. Just go to the website, sign up, and you're entered. We've got seminars coming up on Wednesday, August 1, 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m., Debt Free as Me. We're going to walk through all the steps we use to preserve future income for you and your family, how to eliminate debt using bankruptcy, solutions to eliminate debt outside of bankruptcy. We'll also have a special segment by Jeff Kirshner on the basics of filing a disability claim, Attendees get a free copy of my book, Dump Your Debt. Sign up at thavgross.com or lawandreality.com or call 888-235-HELP. We also have a seminar coming up Wednesday, August 22nd, 6 to 7:30 p.m., Estate Planning for the Later Years. We're going to go through the elements of an estate plan, documents you must have while you're living. Pat Simasko, our elder law expert, is going to lead us through nursing home and extended care, Medicaid planning, and aid and attendance benefits for vets. Attendees get a free $300 gold certificate off the cost of an estate plan. Sign up thavgross.com, lawandreality.com, or call 888-235-HELP. Also remember, you can always come in for a free consultation. Just go to the website or call 888-235-HELP. Debt and estate planning issues with Brian, tax issues with Jenny, elder law issues with Pat Simasko, disability issues with Jeff Kirshner, business issues with myself. Sign up at lawandreality.com or call 888-235-HELP. Also, go to the website and check out our free reports, How to Save Your Home from Foreclosure, Business Formations and Loans and Grants for Small Businesses in Detroit and Michigan. Also, the Retiree's Guide to Social Security from Pat Simasko. I want to thank our sponsors, THAV Gross, Simasko Law. Now back to the show.
If you're retired and in a financial crisis, there is a way out.
It pains me when I see a retired couple exhaust their savings by paying credit card bills and for a home hopelessly underwater.
THAV Gross specializes in helping retired people in financial crisis.
You just can't keep paying until you're broke. You need to address the problem now.
888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
We're THAV Gross. Our firm will solve your problem.
You can't work. You have to deal with pain and stress. Worse yet, our system for applying for disability benefits seeks to deny you the benefits you're entitled. Jeff Kirshner is an expert in obtaining disability and workers' compensation benefits for his clients. You need to call Jeff before you apply or after you're denied to get the benefits you deserve. 888-235-HELP. 888-235-HELP. Carrying too much debt? Resolve your debt. Call THAV Gross.
You don't need to be broke, and you don't need to hit rock bottom. If you have income and you're struggling with debt, dump it. Think about the next 10 or 20 years. If you do what the banks tell you, you'll have nothing to retire with. There is a solution.
Don't waste your future. Call THAV Gross. We're experts at eliminating credit card debt. 888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP. Is the debt piling up? Struggling to get by?
It's all about preserving future income. Bankruptcy is one option. When it's right, it's the least costly, most effective way to save your home, eliminate a second mortgage, and wipe out credit card debt. But you need to address the problem now.
We help people with bankruptcy. Call the experts.
We're THAV Gross. Our firm will solve your problem.
888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
All right, so we talked about buying a business, the things you have to worry about in a purchase agreement. But let's go back to what we said at the beginning. What choice of entity do I use? First of all, you never want to buy the business in your own name, because if you don't have a corporation or a limited liability company, then you're personally liable for all the debts of the business. So what you want to do is you always use some type of independent entity to be the purchaser.
Can I ask a question on that? Because the one I always get, mom and dad, they got a little money, they want to buy the rental house. And do they buy it in their own name? Do they buy the LLC? Well, and I always say, if you're going to do the LLC, you still got to follow all the corporate form, and they never
You do have to follow the corporate
that.
form, but the buying the house in an LLC's name is a much better choice, because just take the picture of somebody walking down the stairs in your rental house, and they fall and they break their neck, and they sue you, and your insurance isn't enough.
Yeah.
So if the house is in your own name, now after the insurance is maxed out, they're coming after your assets. If you have it owned by an LLC, once the insurance is maxed out, the only thing they can get are the assets in the LLC. That would include the house. And that's it.
So you have an LLC or a corporation accomplishes the same thing. Does
a single member LLC do the same thing, though?
It does the same thing from a standpoint of limited liability. It doesn't have the same consequences from a standpoint of tax liability. A single member limited liability company still creates greater exposure to certain taxes at the state level than does a multi-member LLC, which would be 2 or more members, because then it's treated as a partnership or a corporation. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The concept is this. If you have a corporation or an LLC, that is the person that's operating the business, and that is the person that's liable for the debts. The owners, which would be the shareholders of a corporation or the members of an LLC, by virtue of that status, do not have personal liability unless they've guaranteed the debt, like in a lease when they sign the guarantee, or unless they are a control person of the entity and they failed to pay the taxes for any state taxes and for federal taxes, for payroll taxes that are withheld from the employees. But you have a decision to make now with the new tax law as to whether it should be a S corporation, a C corporation, or an LLC. A C corp is a corporation that pays its own tax. And under the new tax law, that's a flat 21% tax, which is much less than what it used to be. It used to scale all the way up to 60–70%. The problem is, in a C corp, when you pay the tax, if later on you sell the business or you liquidate the business and then you distribute the money to the owners, yourself as the owner, you have to pay tax again on the distribution. So there's a double tax anytime you have a C corp. In an S corp and an LLC, the entity does not pay the tax, it passes through to you. Now under the new tax law, if you are a pass-through entity, you get a 20% deduction off of your taxable income to the extent of the income of the LLC or the S corp. But there's a big exception. If that business is a personal service corp,
like a lawyer,
or
a
doctor, but not an architect or an engineer because they got an exception from the law for some reason.
They had a better lobby.
Or because the chief operating officer of the country happens to have an affinity for real estate, which requires engineers and architects. That could be also a link there. But in that case, they're excluded. But everyone else has this, the 20% is limited to the first $315,000 of income if you're married filing joint, and it phases out at $415,000. So the point is, and we're kind of running short of time, is you need to carefully examine both which entity you want from a standpoint of which is the better tax advantage, and those decisions need to be made carefully in consultation with your accountant, your CPA, and your lawyer so that you get it right. You can't just pick up a form from Zoom.com and think that they're going to counsel you on those issues. It's not about the forms. The forms are the easy part. The correct part is negotiating for the purchase agreement and also protecting yourself from the standpoint of taxes. Have a great week. We'll be back next week with Law and Reality. Thanks for viewing.